Earlier today, I came across a video on YouTube from ESPN, and I have not yet watched it, but I want to listen to this. It is talking about the Packers and improvements they need to make this offseason, so I want to listen to what they have to say. Always like hearing what other people are thinking, and I will give my thoughts as always. And this was posted on Mina Kimes' ESPN channel. I believe it's a clip from NFL Live. So let's hear what they have to say.
The Packers looking to build off an impressive 2023 in which they became the youngest team since the 1970 merger to win a playoff game. On offense, the biggest change comes in the backfield where Josh Jacobs replaces Aaron Jones, and Green Bay parted ways with defensive coordinator Joe Barry, replacing him with former Boston College head coach Jeff Hafley, who inherits a talented defense that added Xavier McKinney this offseason. Tim, with the offseason changes, there's a lot there kind of reminding everybody. What are your expectations for Jordan Love in year two?
I think they're going to be really good. A lot of people say, hey, like, who's the team that can challenge the 49ers? And everyone always wants to say, well, like, hey, maybe it's Philadelphia. But, look, I think you can look in, the NFC North and say, look, Green Bay and Detroit are right there as well. Like, I think Green Bay can be that good. Jordan Love was dominant the second half of the season. In fact, some of the young wide receivers really stepped up. And as we look at some of those additions and guys that they lost, look, Josh Jacobs, I think, ends up being an upgrade. Aaron Jones was hurt quite a bit a year ago. David Bakhtiari hasn't really been consistently on the field for years. And so I think when you look at it, you can say Jordan Love continues to improve. They are talented on defense, as you mentioned. I think Green Bay is a real contender.
And when we look last year, the Packers were in that game with the 49ers in the playoffs. Honestly, the first half seemed like we had that game. Thought for a second, we had a chance of making it to the NFC Championship. And then, unfortunately, some things didn't go our way. A missed field goal. Jordan Love throws, an interception there near the end to end the game. But the Packers were really in that game with the 49ers, so I do not think it's crazy whatsoever to think that they're going to be in that same tier this next season, the next regular season, because over the final 8 games, this Packers team took it to another level, and you couldn't see it here, but they showed his first 9 game stats versus last 8 games. In his last 8 games, 18 touchdowns, 1 interception. And just imagine what's going to happen here when Jordan Love and all these young players are coming into their second season where they're not having to learn the offense. Lots of these rookies, they have it under, they understand it now. This whole offseason, they can go through it without having to go through all the rookie stuff, the combine. They're just here training, ready to go with a full season under their belt. And I'm very excited to see how this team starts off, because last year it started off a little sloppy at times, went through that losing streak. But I think that had a big part to do with just the inexperience. And as they got more snaps under their belt, this team got better and better and better. And I do feel like they're going to start off where they ended last year with one of the better offenses in the NFL.
So I think expectations should be super high.
Yeah, nothing's going to change with Jordan Love's contract with those expectations, because he's going to want one at some point before they kick off week 1, and he's earned it. So they're going to have to figure that out. The sense is around the league is that Green Bay is motivated to do a deal, to do an extension with Jordan Love. But I'm also told that Love's willing to be a little patient here, because you're looking at a lot of quarterbacks that could get paid fairly soon. Jared Goff in Detroit, in Miami with Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Those will set an even higher market for a quarterback landscape that's above $50 million per year for some of these guys. And so if you're Jordan Love, you can sit back a little bit. But the feeling is that there's enough mutual interest for this to get done, especially the Packers GM for all the bullets he took for taking Jordan Love 3 or 4 years ago and waiting it out. And now they want to reap those benefits by locking him up long term.
Yeah, look.
And on May 3rd, we had the day where Jordan Love could finally receive an extension, because it had been 1 year since he signed that extension from last year, which goes only through 2024. And I've been contemplating recently with, how long is it going to take for the Packers and Love to get this extension done? Because I really have no doubt in my mind that it's going to get done before the season. That's what I believe. But when you look at, OTAs, I think it starts May 20th, I believe, May 20th or 21st. And I was just wondering, is there any part of Jordan Love, and maybe talking with his agent, where you don't want to go out there and practice a ton when, you have a risk of injury, when you could lose out on $200+ million if you suffer some kind of serious injury. And I'm not sure if that'll go into his thinking when it comes to, when he wants to get a deal done, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was maybe in his mind. Maybe not. Maybe he's fine playing out OTAs and all the way till training camp if he needs to wait until he feels like the Packers are offering him what he thinks he deserves. But Jordan Love is going to become one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think it's a matter of when and not if.
Looks pretty smart. And to your point, I mean, if you're Jordan Love, maybe you do wait it out a little bit and you could get even more money. That market continues to reset. Mina, we talked about the Packers defense being their Achilles heel a lot late last season, and maybe one of the reasons why they didn't go further, obviously. What do you think of the changes they've made this offseason there?
I think they were good and necessary because, as you said, it was not the offense that held this team back, not just last year, but the last few years. It's a defense that's really underperformed relative to its talent level. So I see two major changes that will determine whether or not they can make the necessary improvement. One is at safety, which was a huge area of need for this team, a huge area where they struggled. You go out, you give a very large contract by Green Bay standards in particular to Xavier McKinney. You draft Javon Buller, who's a really feisty he's like a ball hawk of a safety from Georgia that I think will be good in their defense. And then the other, and this is perhaps even more important, is the coaching change. You mentioned they hired Jeff Hafley from Tim's alma mater, Boston College. With that, there will be a scheme change, more single high, which I think explains partly why they went out and signed Xavier McKinney. But for me, it's not even just about scheme so much as it is about execution. So much with this pass defense, both pass and run defense in recent years, if you saw busts in coverage, miscommunications, guys not fitting the run properly. So for Hafley, it's not just about that change in scheme. It's about getting more out of the players on the roster. And if he can do that, this team will be a serious contender.
And that was one of the biggest issues last year, especially later in the season, where we heard about the Packers, their miscommunication issues on defense. Matt LaFleur made it clear that he was going to become more involved on the defensive side of the ball. And, when you look at Hafley coming in, one of the biggest reasons was his ability to make things simple so these guys don't have to think quite as much, because I think it seemed like some of those communication issues near the end of last season when the Packers were struggling a little bit on defense was that for whatever reason, they had trouble at times getting the play in on time. There were certain plays where you could see that there just was some miscommunication on the defensive side of the ball, and there's differing opinions on exactly why that is. Was it Joe Barry not getting the play in on time? Was it the players not communicating it as quickly? And the bottom line is, there were more miscommunication issues than there should have been. And so, at least from the sound of Hafley coming in here, the idea is that he's going to make things simpler. He can explain the scheme in a simple way so these guys can play fast, and it sounds great, all that they're saying, and I guess we'll have to wait and see once the season starts if that translates onto the field, if it is as simple as it sounds like it should be, so these guys can fly around, play free, play fast, play aggressive. And just looking at different quotes from some of these defensive linemen, you can tell that they sound excited about the change in scheme and their ability to be a little bit more aggressive, not have to think quite as much. And there's no doubt when you look at the defensive side of this Packers team coming into 2024, I mean, there's just a lot more talent here. It's an upgrade bringing in Xavier McKinney, becoming the fourth highest paid safety in the NFL, a much bigger, impactful player than a guy like any of the safeties last year, in Darnell Savage, Jonathan Owens, Rudy Ford, and then also to bring Javon Bullard in. The safety room is going to be much improved from last season, as well as the linebacker core. I think that Devondre Campbell had some good times there at middle linebacker, but as the years have gone on, I think he sort of took a dip down in his production, was also dealing with some injuries, and I'm really excited to see what Edgerrin Cooper can be out there with Quay Walker. So right now, we're hopeful. We're hopeful that this defense can actually take some steps forward, and you look at all the positives of some of these new players coming in, their physicality, and we really won't know until the season starts. We can make all predictions, but eventually we're going to have to see it come to pass on the field. So to end off this video, I want to share a verse that I shared earlier today on my community section, but I also wanted to end this video with this verse, and it's in Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. And for me, this has been a verse where, since I was a young kid, my mom she would play these songs where they would have different verses, and this one it's probably the one that stuck into my head the most. And I think that in any stage in life, it's just a good verse to come back to, when you're trying to make decisions, or sort of look at yourself and look at where you are and recognize and trying to recognize, are you doing what God wants you to be doing, or are you doing what you want to be doing and it doesn't align with what God wants you to do? Because I do believe that God has a plan and purpose for every single one of us, and he's given us the different gifts and abilities that he wants to be used for his glory and to make his name great. And there can be times where we can get into what we want instead of what God wants, and it's in those moments where it takes sitting and recognizing, oh, am I doing what God wants me to do, or am I doing what I want me to do? And I think sometimes, or lots of times, God does give us desires. I believe he gives us dreams for different reasons, because he created in us purpose to pursue different dreams, and that's why we have lots of these desires to do different things. But I think that any time that you put any dream or desire above God, that can be a problem. But I think that when you really just submit yourself to God and you surrender your life to Jesus, it's he that lives through you. It's no longer you that live, and it really comes down to obeying God and doing what he wants you to do. And sometimes it's not always easy. There are things that sometimes you'll have to give up just because it's not aligned with what God has for your life. And it's not that this is a life where you don't experience a joy because you're just giving up all these things. The reality is that there's way more joy, there's way more than you can even imagine that God has for you when you surrender your life to him. The God of the universe knows you better than you know yourself, and he has great plans for your life. And when you submit and you try to consistently submit, which I really do want to do what God wants me to do. I really don't want to ever get off on my own. And if I ever do, one of my prayers is, God, please just keep me aligned with what you want for me. And if I ever get off, please correct me and put me back on the right path. And when you do get on that path where you're, doing your best to hear from God and be in a relationship with him, the things that'll come from surrendering to God are way greater than what you could ever have planned for yourself, because you have the God of the universe, the God who created all that we see, on your side. And so he sees the future. He knows what you need and when you need it. And there are times where you may not even realize that you need something, and God can come through and reveal that to you. And so that's basically what I wanted to share today. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.